Welcome everyone to another Silver Tech webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how to use AI to your advantage as a marketer. My name is Christina Baker. I am the digital strategy lead. I'll be moderating today's conversation. And with me today is Steve Callan, VP and Solution Architecture, and Chad Campbell, our VP of Sales.
Thanks, Christina.
So guys, let's kick it right off. Seems like everyone's talking about AI. And we've now are starting to hear rumblings that AI is the biggest thing to hit the internet, maybe ever. So what do you see out there? How are folks using AI? How do you feel like it's changed the digital marketplace?
AI has certainly been in the news for quite some time. It's been hyped for years and years. I think marketers are probably saying, oh, why is this any different? So what's interesting is that as of last March, when OpenAI announced their new models, it in a way gave AI a voice. And since then, what we've been seeing is the inclusion of that into a multitude of different software products, SaaS solutions that are out there. A lot of marketers are starting to ask, okay, do I need this? And how do I use it if I do need it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at it, trying to understand it, trying to understand how to use it. What we're seeing a lot of, or what I'm seeing a lot of, is uncertainty. There's something called the Gartner hype cycle. And I think if anybody knows about that, it's kind of, there's something new that comes into the market and there is excitement about it initially and it peaks. And I think that's where we are right now with AI. There's a lot of companies out there, a lot of new platforms, a lot of existing platforms are trying to incorporate it. But I think we're about to go down into the trough of that in the next, predict 6 months to a year. I could be way off on that. Could be way off on that. Yeah, don't hold me to that. So I think while we're in that peak, marketers are going to have to find ways that they can incorporate AI into their day-to-day on small levels or on very specific things they can do internally, like, looking at siloed data together using AI or creating content or things like that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up such a great point there when talking about that hype cycle, because I think it would be surprising for a lot of, our listeners to think that, well, why would it already be on decline? This just came out in March. But really, we've been using AI in different ways for quite some time. This is just now kind of getting the more publicity of it. But things like, chatbots and product targeting, all of these are, powered by some form of AI. But still, we see this sort of hesitancy for adoption of AI. Why do you think that is, Steve?
There's a couple of different factors. The first, of course, is the fear of the unknown. A lot of risk associated with putting anything out there into the world. Your own data, using something that comes back from AI and publishing that out to the world. But it's also potentially just simply the dizzying pace of the technology right now coming out on the market, and everyone hesitant to touch anything and invest anything in fear that it will be antiquated in 2 weeks' time. And they may not be wrong.
Yeah.
I think the other hesitation is that where do you start? What do you trust? There's probably more documentation that you get with this microphone than you get with how to use ChatGPT or anything else. So I think getting started is probably, tough. I think people are busy, so you got to overlay this onto your day-to-day workload to learn this and how best to use it. But as marketers, we kind of have to figure out how to start incorporating it into our day-to-day.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think what we're seeing, certainly from our side and the different CMS platforms that we work with, we're seeing a lot of the platforms moving in that direction of incorporating AI within the user experience of the platform. So not necessarily, sort of front end facing user experience, customer experience side, but on the back end for the user experience of the content editor. Do you think that that's being fueled by the platforms themselves, or do you think there's demand for maybe some of that sort of safety of it coming out of a platform with a name that I know and trust and feel that I can adopt it more easily?
Yeah, I mean, Steve will probably have other opinions on it. In my opinion, a lot of our platforms that we support are more .NET based platforms, so Microsoft stack of technologies. So I think, overlaying what Microsoft is doing into their platforms is kind of a necessity to do. They have to do it to keep up because it's happening so quickly, and they're trying to find ways that it's going to help their end users, mostly marketers, some developers, and folks like that, to be able to start to use it in some meaningful way, like Kentico and Sitefinity are doing with some of the content recommendations within their platforms.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the timeline of the inclusion of a lot of these features into the platforms, I can see why marketers might start to look at something and say, is this trustworthy? Can I start using it? Oftentimes, a lot of these platforms have roadmaps that go out 2 years. And if they had the foresight to see this 2 years ago, then good on them. But I think that they're also moving very, very quickly as well. So there's a lot of question marks for people. But that being said, it is the time for everybody to start testing these tools, seeing what comes back. Doesn't mean you have to publish it all out to the world, but starting to see what can you do, how can you make your organization more scalable, how can you make your time or your team's time more efficient with the tools that are available to you now.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, and Chad, to your point, there's not a lot of documentation around sort of, let's say maybe the safety of this. But I think there's probably a hesitancy too, because there may be this sort of anticipation of a training gap. Am I gonna have to train up my staff on how to use this tool? And then what does that look like? And then what are best practices? Where are the potential pitfalls or risks? There's sort of a knowledge gap there, I think, that plays into it as well. And in fact, I was just at a conference recently where where a panelist was speaking very intelligently on AI and AI adoption. And one of the first questions he received was, is this just a fad? And I thought that was very interesting because it's like, is that what people are thinking? Is that reflective of what's out there? Are people thinking, well, here's something that's going to, splash onto the marketplace and now I've got to learn it. And my boss is telling me we got to use it, but I don't know what to do with it. I mean, what we don't want would be like, look at how many MarTech platforms do we see that come out and they're the latest thing. 2 years ago, we would have been on Clubhouse having this conversation right now. And now no one is. So I can certainly understand where they may feel like, well, let's kind of hang back and see what happens and see if this is, the real deal before we invest any time and effort into training up our folks to use it. But I think what's interesting is that the way these CMSs are using AI is actually in a very approachable way. So, what do you think, Chad? Like, what are some of those examples of how the CMSs are using AI in a way that can really work easily with your staff skill set today?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing right now, that's the most practical way, is in content creation. So content recommendations, I might want to merge 5 of my latest blog posts and summarize those into what's trending over the last X amount of months or weeks that we've been posting based on the industry and things like that. So I'm seeing it that way as a lot of potential, because as marketers, the number one pain point is with creating content. The other thing that we're starting to look at is a lot of these platforms we support, and we support a few that have the ability to create personalized content or deliver personalized content, I should say. Now there's an ability to have that AI within those platforms help you develop content to ramp up the amount of content you're creating to actually deliver more personalization based on the analytics that these platforms are collecting as well.
That's been one of the toughest things that I've seen in terms of personalization. The onboarding, the adoption of it is the aspect of writing all of that content. It's a lot of work typically on a marketer. That might not be their full-time job. The ability to create the content, be it yourself or augment it through things, short descriptions and imagery, but then able to now use AI to quickly translate that for all of the different audiences and deploy it in real time. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's a game changer. I mean, that really can put you ahead of your competitors if you use it wisely. But let's kind of like take a step back. What does that mean exactly? Like, how can AI and the predictive analytics models really help marketers in beginning to form those more tailored experiences?
Mm-hmm. And data in general.
Yeah, data in general.
Thinking about your brand, thinking about your product data, thinking about the behaviors and events and interactions that your customers have with you at each of these different digital touch points. Mm-hmm. Bringing that in, having solid data governance around that, organizing that, and then leveraging the tools that are already available, of course, in terms of moving those individuals into certain persona groups and then activating upon that. And then, of course, using the test, learn analytics approaches that we've done for so long.
Yeah, and I mean, I hate to use the word game changer again, but like what an amazing opportunity for smaller marketing teams who don't have a business analyst to work through that. I maybe don't have the funding for a full-time employee that I can say, here's all our data, make sense of it, give me insight. If I can use AI to help me form some of that insight and then run it through a human check of, hey, does this make sense? Then that's a real benefit that can help our marketing teams. I think it's really interesting when we think about practical examples and like what are folks doing today? So how can marketers start to use AI as it relates to web and digital marketing? Can we sort of talk through what are some real world examples, Chad, that you're seeing out there?
You had to pick me.
Of course.
So I think there are a ton of plugins for ChatGPT and other AI tools out there, Bard and some others that I think I've played with a little bit that can really help you on creating content and like asking questions about the content you're creating. I think that's a real practical thing to look at. I think going back a little bit, Steve was talking about data and, having data in different silos and things like that. I think there's a lot of orgs, especially in like financial services, we see it a lot, who have invested heavily in data warehousing, right? All this customer data, then they have a CDP, and then they have maybe a CRM over here. They have all these data silos, and they have a little bit of data all around, and marketers are kind of charged with bringing that together, proving ROI, making that ROI CFO proof where you can validate it. And it's so spread out across different platforms and in different groups and different ownership that it makes it really, really difficult. So I don't know how practical it is to say, hey, I'm just going to, instead of, developing a paragraph of content for my website, jump in and say, how can I use AI to bring this data together to help me prove my ROI, maybe look at what's been successful, what hasn't, what maybe A/B test some things like that. I think you'd need to bring in some of your IT and IS folks, but I think it's a step to take data that you already have within a mid to small size organization or a bank or whatever it might be to start to maybe learn how to leverage some of that data a little bit more practically, because we've talked about it for so long. For 10 years, I've been in this business more, and it was personalization from the day I started working here, and it still is, and there's this disconnect, and I think that's a real area that AI can help kind of bring together for organizations.
Yeah, it's interesting how there's so many parallels there when it comes to like hesitation of adoption, because, we both work very closely with clients and helping them achieve what they're looking to achieve from their digital experiences. And we see a lot of hesitancy with personalization because folks think it's like some crazy strategy where we have to have all this information and everything has to be perfect and the data has to be everything. And it's like, no, you can do small things to get you on that path that you can build upon over time. And it's better to start today with something small than something perfect 10 years from now. And it seems like there's a lot of parallels there with AI as well. Using AI to your advantage today in something small might be as simple as, here's copy I wrote, make it SEO friendly.
Sure.
Something as simple as that, right? And let's just kind of use it in those small ways to start to see where can we make use of this? Where does it save time or unburden our teams so we can do other work that's maybe more complex that we can't rely on AI for?
You asked the question around how can organizations start to use this today. You see a lot of teams where you have groups of very diverse skill sets, typically by role type, typically because out of necessity, and that could be a designer and a developer and a content writer. Not all teams even have that, right? But what the tools that are out there now will allow them to do, provided they're used responsibly, is to augment that skill set and allow them to extend into areas that they might know a little bit about, and it makes them a lot stronger in that areas. And if you know something so deeply, you can leverage a lot of these tools to actually move that much more efficiently. But in order for an organization, more broadly speaking, to take advantage of what's coming, data is going to be huge. And Chad said it really well, that it's not just about having data, it's about identifying where is your data, how is it organized, bringing that together. A lot of organizations have focused over the years on implementing certain tactics along the way. And those came with bringing in their own data needs and silos without a really stronger plan for how that all plays into the long-term vision of things. For the future, and I'll say with this in regards to generative AI or any AI implementation, it's moving so quickly that you can't identify the tactic right now and actually have time to build something and getting it out to market. So the real thing to do is to build your foundation strong so that you can then activate anything that comes your way as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of room there for growth. And as we see AI continue to be refined and continue to improve, as we've seen with releases of ChatGPT and how that tool continues to evolve over time, I think, the opportunity really is endless. And that probably contributes to some of the overwhelm.
Sure.
But it doesn't need to be that way. And I think, too, like when we think about AI and to your point about augmenting teams, sometimes it can be as simple as just get me through this task. I need help with this task. I think I mentioned earlier today using Google's Bard tool to help me come up with a tag in Google Tag Manager that I just could not get to fire. And I was testing and couldn't be, I was hitting a wall and I just needed some fresh ideas. So I took to Bard and said, how do I do this tag? And was able to figure it out through a few iterations and a few trial and error. But like, that's another great use of AI that not everyone thinks of. I think people think of AI and they go right to kind of copywriting and text, but it can also be a great tool when it comes to just understanding tech or best practices, help me understand some of this. Obviously, there always has to be a reality check with anything we get from AI. So that's obviously the caveat there, but I think that it can really set you on that path if you're willing to kind of experiment with it and learn how to prompt well. I think that's another trick of it, is really learning how to prompt well, be specific in your asks, and realize that the tool you can go back to and say, refine it this way, refine it that way. So you can continue to drill down there.
No, yeah, it's the most aggravating thing about AI, in my opinion, is learning how to prompt correctly. Yeah. I mean, it's like you think it's just going to magically work based on the hype, and then you ask for something, it's like, I don't understand.
That. Right, yeah, exactly.
I don't understand.
Right. It's kind of like negotiating with a toddler in some ways. It's like saying when you say to your toddler, would you like a bowl of rice? And they say no. Like, okay, well, would you like some rice? Yeah. Would you like it in a bowl? Yes. Okay. It's like knowing how to ask the question, right, to get what you're looking for. So that's great. So, Chad, if we want to get started today, what should we do?
Call Christina Baker at Silver Tech or Steve Callan. I mean, definitely reach out to us. Let's develop a couple things that we can start with as, pilot programs. Maybe we start with some content creation. Maybe we start with doing some A/B testing, or maybe we start with trying to aggregate some of your data analytics. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity out there for some quick wins that we can help kind of put together a plan, get a quick win, prove it out, build off of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the concept of pilot programs. And I think that's something that, we're doing more and more of recently is we want to have those longer form tests. Sometimes demos just don't do it. They're great to see capabilities, but not always great for a proof of concept. So I think those pilot programs really come into view, and we can really start to kind of test things and make it very personal to your specific needs, your specific industry, and really help your team kind of get off the ground with a lot of this. So guys, this has been really great conversation, a lot to mine here. And I think as we continue to keep an eye on the AI landscape and how it continues to grow, we're only going to have more and more conversations like these. I know, Steve, you've got an awesome blog series on AI on the Silvertech website. So definitely check that out if you're interested in learning more. Thanks for joining today. And thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time.